What if we told you that the Upside Down is real? Well, probably isn't. But there are other things which have happened in Stranger Things that are real. Welcome to Riveted, where we'll reveal the creepiest real stories related to Stranger Things. For a chance to win a $100 Amazon gift card, like this video and comment with the hidden word in the video. The idea of Stranger Things started with how the Duffer Brothers felt they could take the concept of the 2013 film Prisoners, detailing the moral struggles a father goes through when his daughter is kidnapped, and expand it out over 8 or so hours in a serialized TV approach. As they focused on the missing child aspect of the story, they wanted to introduce the idea of childlike sensibilities that they could offer and toyed around with the idea of a monster that could consume humans. When the world was first introduced to Stranger Things, show creators Matt and Ross Duffer explained that they wanted the supernatural element to be grounded in science in some way. To achieve this, they threaded a real government project called MK Ultra into the storyline of Season 1, which formed the basis of Dr. Brenner's experiments on Eleven. Her mother is actually one of the MK Ultra test subjects, and while she was pregnant, Brenner used LSD and sensory deprivation to experiment on her, unwittingly imbuing Eleven with psychic gifts. In real life, the MK Ultra project was created by the CIA in 1953 with the aim of developing mind control techniques that could give America an advantage against Russia in the Cold War. It started as a volunteer-based program and soon evolved into something far more sinister. Participants were subjected to physical and mental abuse via psychedelic drugs, sleep deprivation, and other experimental means. Disturbingly, many of the subjects of MK Ultra had no idea that they were being experimented on. According to the Washington Times, the project began as a response to soldiers returning home with stories about the mind control techniques used by their Soviet, Chinese, and North Korean captors. As John Marks notes in his 1977 book, The Search for the Manchurian Candidate, the CIA's obsession with mind control had its origins during World War II, when the agency's predecessor, the Office of Strategic Services, set up a truth drug program whose purpose was to discover a substance that would make subjects reveal their secrets. One particular experiment, Operation Midnight Climax, even surreptitiously tested the effects of LSD on men who visited brothels, set up within agency safe houses in San Francisco. From 1955 to 1965, the building that was the site of Operation Midnight Climax was described as a top-secret mind control program in which CIA agents used hookers to lure unsuspecting Johns from North Beach bars to what they called the pad, then dosed the men with LSD and observed the X-rated goings-on through a two-way mirror while sitting on a portable toilet swilling martinis. Ken Kesey, the author of the 1962 novel One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, volunteered for MK Ultra experiments with LSD while he was a college student at Stanford University. Kesey later went on to promote the drug, hosting LSD-fueled parties that he called acid tests. Acid tests combine drug use with musical performances by bands including the Grateful Dead and psychedelic effects such as fluorescent paint and black lights. These parties influenced the early development of hippie culture and kickstarted the 1960s psychedelic drug scene. The project also involved a couple of mysterious deaths. Frank Olson was a scientist who worked for the CIA. At a 1953 CIA retreat, Olson drank a cocktail that had been secretly spiked with LSD. A few days later, on November 28, 1953, Olson tumbled to his death from the window of a New York City hotel room in an alleged suicide. The family of Frank Olson decided to have a second autopsy performed in 1994. A forensics team found injuries on the body that had likely occurred before the fall. The findings sparked conspiracy theories that Olson might have been assassinated by the CIA. The dangerous nature of this research eventually led to the project's shutdown in 1965, and although many of the relevant documents were later destroyed, enough information leaked out to later inspire shows like Stranger Things. In 1974, New York Times journalist Seymour Hersh published a story about how the CIA had non-consensual drug experiments and illegal spying operations on U.S. citizens. His report started the lengthy process of bringing long-suppressed details about MK Ultra to light. The following year, President Ford, in the wake of the Watergate scandal and amid growing distrust of the U.S. government, set up the United States President's Commission on CIA Activities within the United States to investigate illegal CIA activities, including Project MK Ultra and other experiments on unsuspecting citizens. The CIA insists that MK Ultra-type experiments have been abandoned, although Canadian investigative journalist Elizabeth Nixon, whose mother had been a subject, claims that they continue today under a different set of acronyms. The Duffer Brothers also drew inspiration from a government conspiracy called the Montauk Project. Stranger Things was even going to be called Montauk at one point. The Montauk Project had many things going on and did many experiments in terms of time and space research. In the earliest phases, they proved they could materialize a thought from a person's mind into a physical reality. This, of course, involved religious concepts and ideas. According to a mind-blowing conspiracy theory, Camp Hero allegedly housed an underground government facility that conducted a wide range of questionable scientific experiments. While the Duffer Brothers didn't lift the entire story of the Montauk experiment for their sci-fi series, there are a handful of aspects of the show that seem to draw direct inspiration. To understand the Montauk Project, you need to hear about the Philadelphia experiment. According to the stories, the Navy was conducting experiments in 1943. The goal was to render a military vessel invisible so that enemies could not detect it by radar or other means. These experiments yielded an unexpected result. Not only did they purportedly figure out how to make the ships invisible, but they also accidentally sent one ship, the Eldridge, through a portal to another dimension and another time. Of course, they wanted to experiment further. A number of questionable experiments were conducted in the Montauk, New York area during the 1980s. A man named Alfred Bielek, who was apparently involved, suggested that these experiments accidentally opened a hole in hyperspace between Montauk in 1983 and the year 1943, which, he alleges, threatened to engulf part of the planet. Only by destroying all of the equipment could Bielek and his brother Duncan save the world. This definitely happened in the world of Stranger Things. The experiments on 11 rip a hole in space which goes on to infect the town of Hawkins. To stop this, Elle and her newfound friends closed the gate to save Hawkins from destruction. In one of Alfred's interviews, he said they could go anywhere on Earth, and they went to the moon, Mars, and the whole galaxy. There was a special program involving some research in 1983 when the station went down. It was resumed when the station was rebuilt in 1987. Then it was called Project Hellfire. Alfred was allegedly in charge of that phase of it, which involved retrieving an object from a planet on the other side of the galaxy, 120,000 light years away. It was highly specialized, and it is still highly classified. He gave a bit of insight into what is on Mars. Apparently, there are colonies there, but there's evidence that the colonies have been overrun and destroyed. Then he also explained why they were specifically interested in the moon. The moon is being mined by US-Russian interests and obviously some alien interests. They are mining the back of the moon, bringing titanium back. Alfred explained that the moon is an artificial object. It was built as a space vehicle by someone long ago and parked in orbit because they apparently had trouble with it. The story goes that whoever was in the original moon parked it there, built themselves a smaller moon object, and took off. There are stories of the Vedic literature that there were 2 moons around the Earth for a period of time. Prior to about 25,000 years or so ago, there was no moon in Earth's orbit. It was brought in and parked. The people in the Montauk Project have been up there, and the Russians are up there, and they are mining the backside for titanium. The Montauk story gets even creepier. Bielek went on to claim that his brother Duncan began to age rapidly, thanks to the accident. Only by traveling back in time to convince their parents to have another son could they keep Duncan alive, transferring his soul into the new brother's body. This has not yet happened in Stranger Things, but in case it does, we'll know where the inspiration came from. Following this procedure, Duncan began to exhibit incredible psychic powers, and if you want the details, you can get them in the book. Preston B. Nichols, who claims to have repressed memories of the Montauk Project, has since written one called The Montauk Project: Experiments in Time, which discusses this phenomenon in more detail. According to him, Duncan used a device known as the Montauk chair to strengthen his abilities to the point where he could even materialize objects out of thin air. In the chair, Duncan did an experiment called the Seeing Eye. Nichols writes, "With a lock of a person's hair or other appropriate object in his hand, Duncan could concentrate on the person and be able to see as if he was seeing through their eyes, hearing through their ears, and feeling through their body. He could actually see through other people anywhere on the planet." This sounds eerily like the experiments conducted with 11 in Hawkins' lab. 11 isn't quite that strong on Stranger Things, but she has a number of parallels with Nichols' account of Duncan and the Montauk chair, including the ability to visit other planes of existence through sensory deprivation and even open interdimensional portals. If you recall, Season 1 shows 11 attempting to hear words spoken in other rooms. Like 11, Nichols' account claims Duncan supposedly brought a monster into our world, too. Creepy. The monster in the Montauk Project was called Beast. The alien creature appeared after Nichols and other colleagues decided they'd had enough of the whole experiment. At that moment, according to Nichols, Duncan let loose a monster from his subconscious, which could only be defeated once all the equipment in Camp Hero was destroyed. The monster didn't appear underground in the null point. It showed up somewhere on the base. It would eat anything it could find, and it smashed everything in sight. Several different people saw it, but almost everyone described a different beast. It was either 9 feet tall or 30 feet tall, depending on who saw it. There were also several abductions in Montauk. As we know, 11 is, well, likely the 11th child to be a test subject at Hawkins' lab. We can therefore deduce that there were at least 10 other children involved in these experiments, maybe more. The introduction of Kylie in Season 2 basically confirms this theory. In Seasons 1 and 2, we find out that 11 was basically abducted by the scientists, stolen right from under her mother's nose. This exact thing happened in Montauk, according to Nichols. There was one kid there who would go out and get other kids and bring them to the project. He was like a tractor beam. He lived in Montauk and would circulate around very efficiently. Some kids returned home, some didn't. The kids chosen were between 10 and 16, or maybe 18 at the oldest and 9 at the youngest. While it's being confirmed that the MKUltra project did exist, plenty of experts have their doubts still when it comes to the Montauk Project. Then there's the East Tennessee theory. There's an entire Reddit thread devoted to this theory that Hawkins is actually just East Tennessee. East Tennessee is home to the Oak Ridge National Laboratory, which is eerily similar to Hawkins National Laboratory. Apparently, this lab played a major role during the Manhattan Project and the Cold War, and it's on Roane County's border. A Roane County school bus also appears in the show's first episode. Roane County doesn't exist in Indiana, but it is a county in East Tennessee. In episode 2 of season 1, Hopper says,
"We've been searching all night. Went all the way to Cartersville."
Yeah, you guessed it. Cartersville is a community in East Tennessee's Hawkins. In that same episode, a character mentions going fishing in Etowah, another town in East Tennessee. Oak Ridge also did weird tests on people in the 1940s, including a man named Eb Cade, who checked into the hospital with a broken leg and was secretly injected with plutonium-239 and labeled Human Product 12. Wow, these are just too many coincidences. Weird things have happened and are still happening in America and the rest of the world. You can expect a monster to emerge from the upside down and straight into your living room any day now. Creepy, right? Check back tomorrow for another mind-blowing video. This has been Riveted.